Hello, I'm Elena. My family called me the failure. Too hesitant, too bookish, too idealistic to ever succeed. They laughed at my career choices at holiday dinners, mocked my public defender salary, even bet against me passing the bar exam. I let them for years, until the day I walked into the courtroom they were standing in, wearing the judge's robe they never thought I'd earn. But here's the part they never saw coming. What would you have done if your own mother called you the family disappointment while asking for free legal advice? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was almost 6:30 when I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' Tudor-style home in Oakridge Heights. The neighborhood hadn't changed. Still manicured lawns, still luxury cars lined up like trophies. I sat in my 7-year-old Civic for longer than necessary, studying my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blazer was wrinkled from the hour-long drive. My hair was falling out of its careful bun. I hadn't even had time to touch up my makeup after court, but I walked in anyway. The housekeeper, Marta, opened the door with a sympathetic smile that told me everything I needed to know. "They're in the dining room," she whispered, squeezing my arm gently. "Your brother brought his new partner." I nodded, taking a deep breath as I walked through the marble foyer toward the sound of crystal clinking and practiced laughter. The dining room was exactly as I remembered it, chandelier glinting off the polished mahogany table, family portraits lining the walls, everyone seated according to my mother's precise hierarchy. Mom in her designer suit, Dad with his surgeon's hands folded over his napkin, my older brother James checking his Apple Watch, and my sister Victoria with her perfect posture and Harvard law degree framed behind her in the family portrait. I got a few distracted glances, a few quick nods. Nobody stood. "Elena, you made it," my mother said, her tone suggesting she'd been expecting the opposite. "We were about to start without you." The seat left for me was at the far end, next to the kitchen door where servers kept bustling in and out. I slid into it without comment. Then I noticed the place settings. Everyone had the family china, the Wedgwood with the gold trim that my grandmother had brought over from England. Even James's new girlfriend had been given the good dishes. But in front of me sat a mismatched plate, slightly chipped at the edge, with a paper napkin instead of the embroidered cloth ones everyone else had. I stared at it a second too long. No one said a word, not even a joke to acknowledge it, just silence. That was the crueler part. I smiled and unfolded the paper napkin across my lap. The server came by to take drink orders. "Just water for me," I said. "Still avoiding wine? Good for you, sis. Not everyone has your restraint," James said with a smirk, raising his glass of Bordeaux. That stung more than it should have. I'd never had a drinking problem. I just preferred to stay clear-headed. At family gatherings, it was my defense mechanism, but they'd spun it into another perceived weakness. The conversation shifted to careers inevitably. It always did. Victoria lit up. "The firm's putting me on the Westridge merger," she said, swirling her wine. "Potentially $1 billion deal. They're trusting me to lead the client meetings next month." Everyone nodded appreciatively. My father reached over to squeeze her shoulder. "That's my girl," Dad said, beaming. "Some of us carry the family legacy forward." Then he turned toward me. "And some of us, well." It wasn't just the words. It was the pause, like he had considered finishing the sentence but decided I wasn't worth the effort. I didn't respond. I sipped my water and placed the glass carefully back on the table. Victoria leaned toward me. "Well, at least the public defender's office must be fulfilling? Not everyone's cut out for the pressure of corporate law. Must be nice having weekends free." More laughter, polite, controlled. Even Mom smiled, though she quickly redirected. "Anyway, James, How's the medical practice expansion coming along? Your father says the new wing will be ready by spring? I took another sip of water. Let the coolness wash away the words I wanted to say. They thought I was struggling. They thought I was barely getting by on a public servant's salary. They had thought so for years. After I graduated from law school, not Harvard or Yale like Victoria, but Georgetown on a public interest scholarship, I didn't correct their assumptions about my career path. I let them believe what they whispered. She's settling. Maybe she couldn't handle the big leagues. She was never as driven as Victoria. Let them think that, because what I was building was something they couldn't measure in billable hours or corporate retainers. I looked around that table. Crystal glasses, sterling silver, conversations about summer homes and investment portfolios. The air smelled like expensive perfume and privilege, and they didn't even realize what was happening beyond their bubble. The server returned with dessert. My mother had apparently remembered to tell the kitchen about everyone's preferences. Chocolate soufflé for James, creme brulee for Victoria, berry tart for the new girlfriend. But in front of me was placed a plain grocery store cookie still in its plastic wrapper. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. James chuckled. Mom still remembers you're not one for fancy desserts, huh, Elena? I looked up at the server. No need to apologize, I said, though he hadn't. I'm actually not staying for dessert. My mother frowned. Leaving already? You just got here. I nodded. I have an early morning tomorrow. Important case. Victoria rolled her eyes slightly. Let me guess. Another teenager caught with marijuana? Or is it a domestic dispute this time? I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my plate. Actually, it's a judicial appointment. But thank you for your interest in my career. I stood, nodded to the server as I passed him. The dinner was lovely, thank you. I didn't wait for another comment, or even for their reactions to settle. I walked out before anyone could summon the nerve to ask a real question. The night air outside was cool against my skin. I pulled my coat tighter as I crossed to my car, keys already in hand. The streets of Oakridge Heights were quiet, except for the occasional luxury car gliding past immaculate lawns. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, letting the silence wrap around me like a shield. As I drove, I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't call anyone. I just let the neighborhoods change from mansions to modest homes to the urban core where I'd made my life. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, still remembering the texture of that paper napkin, the way it felt against my fingertips, like sandpaper dipped in condescension. A red light caught me just outside the courthouse district. My eyes shifted left, and there it was, the Community Justice Center. It hadn't changed much since we'd opened it. The paint on the sign was fading a bit, but the purpose remained clear. Not just a legal aid office, but a community hub where people could find help navigating a system that wasn't built for them. I pulled over. The parking lot was empty at this hour, the kind of quiet that feels like possibility. I stayed in the car, engine idling, and let my mind rewind. That building had once been everything. When I was 26, I'd taken my public defender salary and my law school classmate Maya's nonprofit experience, and we'd applied for every grant we could find. The space was bare at first, just old linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. But it was ours. I turned it into my mission. We built a legal resource center that could track cases, connect clients with social services, and predict which neighborhoods were most at risk for housing discrimination and police overreach. But I knew no one in my family would take me seriously. Not with my idealism, not with my refusal to chase corporate dollars. So I created a parallel life. I continued as a public defender by day, building the center by night. I coded the case management system myself, taught community volunteers how to run intake screenings, cold-called law firms for pro bono hours while working back-to-back cases. One Sunday dinner back then, I tried to tell my family about it. I remember Victoria's reaction like it was yesterday. She smirked, fork paused midair and said, "What is this? Like legal charity work? Sounds like something out of a liberal fantasy novel." Dad didn't even look up from his roast beef. "You need to think about a real career, Elena. Something with a future. Corporate law would be a great fit for you. You're detail-oriented." They didn't ask questions, just moved on. I laughed along with them that night. But when I got back to the center, I cried for an hour on the threadbare couch in the break room, then kept writing grant applications. Months later, I secured our first major funding from the State Justice Initiative. They didn't care about my pedigree. They liked results. The system worked. But when I shared our success metrics at Thanksgiving, Victoria took the concept, dressed it up, and presented it to her firm as her pro bono initiative. I didn't find out until Christmas. I walked into the living room and saw my dad toasting her in front of the family. "To Victoria," he said, "for bringing justice to the unfortunate while still maintaining a proper career." No mention of me, no footnote, just erased. I stood there holding a homemade pie I'd spent hours making and felt my face burn. Mom applauded. James raised his glass. I sat in the corner and kept quiet. That was the moment it shifted. Not just that I was invisible, but that they were rewriting the story and leaving me out. I didn't correct them. I didn't pull out the grant applications, the press clippings, the testimonials from clients whose lives we'd changed. I filed everything away quietly, permanently. I promised myself that if I ever got to tell the story again, it would be on my terms and with receipts. My eyes came back to the Justice Center in front of me. It was no longer just a scrappy nonprofit. Now it housed a nationally recognized legal clinic, one of several under the umbrella organization I'd built. I didn't use my family name on most things. I learned early it was better to be underestimated. But the signature on those briefs that changed state law? Mine. The arguments that made it to the federal appeals court? Mine. The systems that helped thousands of people navigate a complex legal world? All mine. I left the parking lot without looking back. The center faded in my rearview mirror, like it never mattered to anyone but me and the clients whose lives it had changed. The drive home was quiet, just the sound of tires on asphalt, and my thoughts cycling back to the way Victoria had looked at me when I mentioned a judicial appointment. She looked like an actress who'd forgotten her next line. It gave me more peace than I thought it would. When I got home, I didn't bother unpacking my briefcase. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and let the silence settle around me. The walls of my downtown loft didn't echo with judgment, just possibility. I left my phone charging on the kitchen counter and went to bed. At 6:15 a.m., I woke to the sound of buzzing. Ping, ping, ping. The screen lit up before I touched it. 17 unread messages in the family group chat. My thumb hovered over it. I already knew what I'd find. That familiar gut pull before. Opening something you didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. I tapped it open. Victoria. Judicial appointment? Is that a flex or a cry for help? Dad. She's always had a flair for the dramatic. That's why she couldn't handle real legal work. Mom. Don't be harsh. She meant well, I think. Victoria. Or she's having another one of her episodes. The last word hit like a slap. Episodes. That was the label they'd given me years ago when I'd missed a family cruise because I was filing an emergency injunction to stop a wrongful eviction of 30 families. When I'd declined dinner at the country club because I was preparing witnesses for a case against the very police department that my father's hospital relied on for security contracts. Episodes. My eyes didn't even blink. I just pressed down on the message thread and saved screenshots. No response, no defense, just silence. Not out of weakness, but out of strategy. Then my phone buzzed again. Different chat. Maya, my best friend and co-founder of the Justice Center. Maya. Hey, Judge Reyes. Saw the family chat this morning. They still don't get it, do they? I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you. I paused. My chest tightened, but not from hurt. Something gentler, something like confirmation. Another message came through. Maya. Also, Victoria's husband came. To the center yesterday. Didn't know you were related. He's looking for a good divorce attorney. Thought you should know. I read it twice, then once more slowly. Victoria's perfect marriage to her law firm partner, the one she flaunted at every family gathering, was apparently not so perfect after all. I texted Maya back. You did the right thing. Thank you. No emojis, no hearts, just truth. Then I went into the family group chat settings, scrolled to the bottom, and hit Leave Conversation. It didn't ask for a reason. Neither did I. I poured myself a second glass of water, then sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The appointment letter was still there in my inbox with the official seal of the state judiciary. To Elena Reyes, Esquire. Subject: Confirmation of judicial appointment. I read each line twice, still not quite believing it myself. After years of work in criminal justice reform, after arguing precedent-setting cases that changed how bail was determined, in our state, after building a legal aid network that served thousands of the most vulnerable citizens, I had been appointed to the Superior Court bench. The appointment would be announced publicly next week. The robbing ceremony was scheduled for the following month. And the first case on my docket? A high-profile corporate fraud trial involving one of Victoria's firm's biggest clients. I didn't wait until the public announcement. By Sunday night, I was already at my desk, the city outside my window dim and settled. I leaned back, pulled my laptop closer, and opened a draft email to the State Bar Association newsletter. Subject: New judicial appointments. Body. The governor is pleased to announce the following appointments to the Superior Court bench, effective immediately. I would be listed there alongside two other new judges, both from prestigious firms, both with connections to the old legal establishment. And me, the public defender, the community lawyer, the one who chose a different path. By Monday afternoon, the news had spread throughout the legal community. My inbox filled with congratulations from colleagues, from law school professors who had believed in me, from clients whose cases had changed their lives. And there, buried among the well-wishes, a terse email from Victoria. Subject: Your appointment. Is this some kind of joke? Dad's checking with Judge Harmon. I didn't respond. No defense, no explanation, just silence. Let her check. Let her find out that her father's golf buddy, the Honorable William Harmon, had been one of my most vocal supporters. Tuesday morning brought a text from James. James. Elena, is it true? Mom's having a fit. Why didn't you tell us you were even being considered? I looked at the message for a long time, remembering all the times I'd tried to share my work, my passions, my successes. All the times they'd talked over me, changed the subject, or twisted my words into something they could dismiss. I typed back, "It's true. Appointment effective immediately. Robbing ceremony next month." His response came quickly. "Can we come?" I set the phone down without answering. Let him wonder. Let him wait. The way I had waited for years for any of them to actually see me. Wednesday brought the first official photos. Me in the courthouse, standing beside the Chief Justice, both of us in our official robes. The local paper ran a profile. From public defender to the bench, Elena Reyes brings community perspective to Superior Court. The article mentioned my work with the Justice Center, my landmark cases, my reputation among both prosecutors and defense attorneys as tough but fair. It quoted the governor calling me a bridge builder in a divided legal landscape. Victoria texted, "Saw your article. Congratulations. Why didn't you tell us you were this? Connected?" Connected. as if the only way I could have achieved this was through the same network she relied on, as if hard work, dedication, and actual results couldn't possibly be the reason. I didn't respond. Thursday morning, I walked into the courthouse for my first official day. The security guards nodded respectfully. The clerk handed me my first docket with a smile. "Good morning, Your Honor." I sat in chambers for a moment before court began, feeling the weight of the robe on my shoulders. Not heavy like a burden, but substantial like a purpose. My phone buzzed. Mom. Elena, your father and I would like to take you to dinner to celebrate your new position. The club on Saturday? We can invite the Harmons. I looked at the message for a long time. The ellipsis before position said everything. They still didn't understand what I had achieved or why it mattered. They were already trying to fit it into their narrative. Connections, social climbing, prestige. Everything but the actual work. I typed back, "Thank you, but I have plans. Saturday. The Justice Center is holding a community legal workshop. Mom. Surely you can reschedule that now that you're a judge." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that would bridge the chasm between her understanding of success and mine. The bailiff knocked on my chamber door. "Court is ready, Your Honor." I stood, straightened my robe, and walked toward the courtroom, leaving my phone and their expectations behind. As I took the bench for the first time, I scanned the gallery out of habit. And there, in the back row, trying to blend in but failing miserably in her designer suit, sat Victoria. Our eyes met for just a moment before I looked away. "All rise," called the bailiff. "The Superior Court for the County of Riverside is now in session. The Honorable Elena Reyes presiding." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The gavel in my hand said everything that years of trying to be heard at the family dinner table never could. "Be seated," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Let's begin." Victoria sat frozen, her expression unreadable. I turned my attention to the case before me, a tenant dispute, nothing glamorous, but to the elderly woman facing eviction, it was everything. For the next hour, I listened carefully, asked precise questions, and rendered a decision that bought the tenant time while protecting the landlord's legitimate interests. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't headline-making. But it was justice, administered fairly, the kind I had dedicated my life to pursuing. When court adjourned, Victoria was still there. She approached the bench hesitantly as the courtroom cleared. "Your Honor," she said, the title awkward on her tongue. "I didn't realize that I was serious," I finished for her. "That's been the problem all along, hasn't it?" She looked down at her expensive shoes. "The family dinner this Sunday. Mom wants you to come." I gathered my papers. "I have plans. More important than family?" I looked at her then. Really looked at her. "My definition of family has expanded over the years, Victoria. It includes people who support each other, who listen, who celebrate successes without trying to diminish them." She flinched. "We've always supported you." "Have you?" I stood, the robe settling around me like armor. "Tell me one thing about my career that you know. One case I've won. One life I've changed." Her silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Your Honor has other cases to prepare for." I walked past her, back to my chambers, closing the door gently, behind me. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette standing there for a long moment before finally turning to leave. They had written me out of the family narrative, so I wrote my own story. And as for the seat they tried to assign, me at their table, I built my own bench. The week after Victoria's courtroom visit passed in a blur of cases, deliberations, and the heavy responsibility of making decisions that changed lives. I found a rhythm in my new role, one that felt natural, like I'd been preparing for it my entire career without fully realizing it. Each morning, I arrived at the courthouse before sunrise, reviewing cases in the stillness before the building came alive with attorneys, defendants, families seeking justice. On Friday afternoon, as I was reviewing briefs for Monday's docket, my clerk knocked on my chamber door. "Judge Reyes, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's rather insistent." I looked up, already knowing who it would be. "My mother?" The clerk nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She says it's a family matter." I sighed, removing my reading glasses. "Send her in, please." My mother entered like she was walking into a contaminated area, her designer purse clutched close to her body, her eyes scanning my chambers with barely concealed judgment. The wood paneling wasn't mahogany. The carpet wasn't plush. The furniture was functional, not decorative. "Elena," she said, her voice tight, "we need to talk about Sunday." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat, Mom." She perched on the edge of the chair, back straight, ankles crossed, the posture of someone planning a short visit. "Your father and I are hosting a celebration dinner. For you. For this." She waved her hand vaguely around my chambers. "Judge Harmon and his wife will be there. The Prestons, the Caldwells. All names from their social circle, none from mine." "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully. "But I already have plans." Her face tightened. "More important than celebrating with your family? What could possibly—" "I'm hosting a dinner for the team that helped build the Justice Center. The people who believed in me when no one else did. That little nonprofit? Elena, you're a judge now. You don't need to keep playing with charity cases." I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly, but a calm certainty. "It's not charity, Mom. It's justice. And it's not little. We serve more people in a month than Dad's hospital serves in a year." She blinked, genuinely confused. "But it doesn't. I mean, what does it pay?" "Purpose," I said simply. "It pays in purpose." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Maybe I was. "Your sister is bringing her new cases to court next week," she said, changing tactics. "The Harrison Industries fraud trial? It's being assigned to your division." So that was it. Not celebration, influence. "Then I'll likely recuse myself due to the family connection," I said evenly. "But that's the point of family, Elena. To help each other." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Victoria says this case could make partner for her if it goes well." I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "That's exactly why I can't be involved, Mom. And it's disturbing that you'd even suggest it." "I'm not suggesting anything improper," she said, flustered. "Just consideration." "The only consideration in my courtroom is the law," I replied. "I need to get back to work now." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Think about Sunday, Elena. Family should come first." As she reached the door, I called after her. "Mom, when was the last time any of you put me first?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. After she left, I sat quietly, letting the weight of decades settle around me. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Maya? About that celebration Sunday. Let's make it bigger. Let's invite everyone. Former clients, volunteers, everyone who's been part of the journey." The line crackled with her laughter. "Now you're talking, Judge. Your place or mine?" "Neither," I said, an idea forming. "Let's have it at the center, where it all began." That Sunday evening, the Justice Center hummed with life. String lights hung from the ceiling, tables were crowded with potluck dishes, and the walls were lined with photos documenting our journey. Not just mine, but all of ours. Clients who had become advocates, law students who had found their calling, communities that had transformed after winning their fights. I stood in the middle of it all, a glass of sparkling water in hand, watching as Maya's kids chased each other around the conference table, as former clients hugged the attorneys who had stood by them, as elderly neighborhood residents shared stories with fresh-faced law students. "Not bad for a failure, huh?" Maya said, appearing at my elbow. I smiled. "Not bad at all." She clinked her glass against mine. "Your family has no idea what they're missing." "No," I agreed. "They really don't." Just then, the door opened, and a young man stepped in hesitantly. I recognized him immediately, my nephew, Christopher, Victoria's son. He had just started law school, according to the family gossip. "Aunt Elena," he said, spotting me. "I hope it's okay that I came. Dad told me about the dinner, and I wanted to see." I walked over, genuinely surprised. "Of course it's okay. Come in. There's plenty of food." He looked around the room, taking in the diverse crowd, the relaxed atmosphere, the sense of shared purpose. "This is all yours? The center?" "Not mine," I corrected gently. "Ours. Everyone here has ownership in what we've built." He nodded, slowly absorbing this. "Mom talks about your cases sometimes. Not to you, but to her colleagues. She says you're unorthodox but effective." I laughed. "That's probably the nicest thing Victoria has ever said about me." Christopher shifted uncomfortably. "She said I shouldn't tell you I'm considering public interest law, that it would encourage you. And what do you think?" He looked around the room again, his eyes lingering on a wall of thank you cards from clients. "I think I'd like to hear more about what you do here. The real story, not the family version." I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Not victory, but possibility. "Let me introduce you to some people who can tell it better than I can." As I led Christopher through the room, introducing him to former clients and fellow advocates, I caught Maya watching me with a knowing smile. This, I realized, was a different kind of legacy than the one my family had tried to force on me. This was a legacy of purpose, not prestige. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Maya and I were cleaning up, my phone buzzed with a text. From Christopher. "Thank you for tonight. I've made my decision about my legal focus. Can I schedule time to talk more?" I smiled, sending back a simple, "Anytime." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Good news?" "Maybe," I said. "A different kind of good news than winning a case or changing a law, the kind that ripples forward." Monday morning arrived with a fresh set of challenges. As I reviewed my docket, my clerk appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable. "Judge Reyes, there's a situation. The Harrison Industries case has been assigned to your courtroom." I frowned. "I requested recusal due to family connection. My sister is on the prosecution team." "Yes, Your Honor, but Judge Harmon denied the request, said the connection wasn't direct enough to warrant reassignment given the court's current caseload." Judge Harmon, my father's golf buddy, the one my mother had mentioned would be at their celebration dinner. I felt the pieces click into place. "I see," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Please have the case files brought to my chambers immediately and schedule a meeting with the court's ethics officer for this afternoon." "Yes, Your Honor." The Harrison Industries case was exactly the kind of high-profile corporate fraud that made careers, or broke them. The kind where justice often took a back seat to influence and connections. The kind where having a judge who might be sympathetic to your side could make all the difference. I spent the morning reviewing the evidence, making detailed notes, and researching precedent. By afternoon, I had formed a clear picture of both the case and what was being attempted. The ethics officer, a retired judge named Margaret Winters, listened carefully as I outlined my concerns. "So you believe your family is attempting to use your position to influence the outcome of this case?" she asked when I finished. "I believe they think they can," I clarified. "My concern is not just the appearance of impropriety, but the actual attempt to create it." Judge Winters nodded thoughtfully. You've documented your recusal request. That's good. But Judge Harmon's denial puts you in a difficult position. I know, I admitted. If I push too hard for recusal, it looks like I'm trying to avoid a complex case. If I don't push hard enough, it looks like I'm complicit. What do you want to do, Elena? I considered the question carefully. I want to hear the case, I said finally. And I want to hear it with such scrupulous adherence to procedure and ethics that no one can question the outcome, whatever it may be. She smiled, slightly. In other words, you want to be a judge. Exactly. Then be a judge, Elena, the best one you can be, and let the chips fall where they may. The Harrison Industries trial began the following week. I walked into the courtroom with my game face on, prepared for the most scrutinized case of my new judicial career. The prosecution team sat ready, Victoria among them, her expression unreadable. The defense team looked equally determined. The gallery was packed with reporters, interested parties, and, to my surprise, my father, sitting in the back row with his arms crossed. All rise, called the bailiff. The Superior Court for the County of Riverside is now in session. The Sakar, Honorable Elena Reyes presiding. I took my seat, surveying the room with a calm I didn't entirely feel. Good morning. Before we begin, I want to address a matter of procedure. As some of you may be aware, one of the prosecuting attorneys is my sister. I requested recusal from this case due to this relationship, but that request was denied by the presiding judge due to court scheduling constraints. I paused, letting this sink in. However, I want to make it absolutely clear that this connection will have no bearing on how I conduct these proceedings or on any rulings I make. This court will adhere to the strictest standards of judicial ethics. If any party feels at any point that my rulings show bias in either direction, you are encouraged to note it for the record. Are there any questions before we proceed? The courtroom was silent. Victoria's face had gone slightly pale. My father shifted in his seat. Very well, I continued. Let's begin with opening statements. For the next 3 weeks, the Harrison Industries trial consumed my professional life. Each day brought new evidence, new witnesses, new challenges to rule on. I maintained a rigorous neutrality, sometimes ruling for the prosecution, sometimes for the defense, always with clear legal reasoning stated for the record. Victoria avoided my eyes during proceedings, but I could feel her watching me during breaks, trying to discern which way I was leaning. My father attended sporadically, his presence a silent pressure I refused to acknowledge. On the final day of testimony, just before closing arguments, the prosecution's star witness, the company's former CFO, faltered under cross-examination. A key piece of evidence, a series of emails that supposedly proved knowledge of fraud at the highest levels, was revealed to have been taken out of context. Victoria's face showed momentary panic. She conferred hurriedly with her colleagues, then requested a brief recess. I granted it, watching as the prosecution team huddled in urgent discussion. When court resumed, Victoria approached the bench. Your Honor, the prosecution requests permission to introduce new evidence that has just come to light. What new evidence, Counselor? Additional emails from the same chain that provide fuller context for the exchanges in question. I frowned. Emails that were in your possession during discovery but not shared with the defense. Victoria hesitated. Emails that were overlooked during initial review? Overlooked, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Ms. Reyes, you know I can't allow new evidence at this stage unless there are extraordinary circumstances. Were these emails truly unavailable until now? She looked down, then back up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time in weeks. No, Your Honor, they were available. Then I must deny your request. The prosecution will proceed with the evidence properly submitted during discovery. Victoria returned to her table, visibly shaken. The rest of the day proceeded according to protocol. Closing arguments, jury instructions, Deliberation. When the jury returned 2 days later with a verdict favoring the defense on most counts, I was not entirely surprised. What did surprise me was Victoria's reaction. Instead of the anger or accusation I expected, she approached me in chambers after court adjourned, looking thoughtful. "You could have helped us," she said quietly. "Even within the rules, you could have given us more latitude." "That's not my job," I replied. "My job is to ensure a fair process, not a particular outcome." She nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand what drives you." She hesitated, then added, "Dad's furious, by the way. He was counting on this case to secure Judge Harmon's support for his hospital's new venture." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Not because I regretted my actions, but because I regretted the transactional view of justice that had taken root in my family. Victoria studied me for a moment longer. "You know, I always thought you were the soft one, the one who couldn't handle pressure. But this," she gestured vaguely around my chambers, "this takes a different kind of strength, doesn't it?" "Yes," I agreed. "It does." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Christopher wants to intern at your center this summer. I told him I'd support it." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said with a ghost of a smile. "I still think you're idealistic and impractical. But maybe that's not the worst thing to be." After she left, I sat quietly at my desk, letting the implications of our conversation settle around me. It wasn't reconciliation, not really, but it was acknowledgement. And after years of dismissal, that felt like progress. My phone buzzed, with a message from Maya. "Heard about the verdict. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than okay. Things are changing." The following Sunday, I received an unexpected invitation, not from my parents, but from Christopher. He was hosting a small gathering at his apartment to celebrate the end of his first year of law school, and he wanted me to come. I arrived with a small gift, a vintage copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that had inspired my own legal journey. The apartment was crowded with Christopher's classmates, a few professors, and to my shock, Victoria and her husband, standing awkwardly near the window. Christopher greeted me with a hug. "Aunt Elena, I'm so glad you came. I want you to meet my study group. They've all heard about the Justice Center." As he led me through the room, introducing me to eager young law students who asked thoughtful questions about public interest law, I caught Victoria watching us. Her expression wasn't hostile or dismissive. It was curious, maybe even a little wistful. Later, as the party wound down, she approached me by the snack table. "He talks about you all the time now," she said, nodding toward Christopher. "You've made quite an impression." "He's a good kid," I replied. "Smart, compassionate. He'll make a fine attorney whatever path he chooses." Victoria sipped her wine. "He's thinking about criminal defense. Did you know?" "He mentioned he was considering it." "Not exactly the family tradition," I shrugged. "Maybe it's time for a new tradition." She considered this, then said something I never expected to hear. "I lost the Harrison case because I cut corners. Because I was so focused on winning that I forgot why I became a lawyer in the first place." I didn't respond immediately, giving her the space to continue if she wanted to. "You never forgot," she added quietly. "Even when we mocked you for it wasn't always easy," I admitted. "No, I imagine it wasn't." She hesitated, then extended her hand. "Congratulations on the appointment, Elena. You earned it." I shook her hand, feeling the weight of unspoken history between us. "Thank you, Victoria." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of all that had happened. But it was a start, a small crack in the wall of judgment that had defined our relationship for as long as I could remember. As I drove home that night, I thought about the different types of victories in life. There are the public ones, The verdicts, the appointments, the recognition. And then there are the private ones, the moments of connection, the small acknowledgments, the quiet realizations that maybe, just maybe, you've been seen clearly for the first time. The following week brought a new set of cases, new challenges, new lives depending on fair decisions. I walked into the courthouse each day with a growing sense of purpose. The black robe no longer felt new or strange. It felt like armor, like responsibility, like the culmination of choices I had made long ago and continued to make every day. One afternoon, as I was reviewing case files in chambers, my clerk knocked on the door. "Judge Reyes? There's someone here to see you." I looked up, expecting another attorney with a motion to file or a request to consider. Instead, my father stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Of course." He sat, his surgeon's hands folded tightly in his lap. "I wanted to apologize," he said without preamble, "for the Harrison case, for trying to influence things." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I've been thinking about what you said to your mother. About when was the last time we put you first?" He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. "I can't remember a time, honestly. We were always so focused on what we wanted for you that we never saw what you wanted for yourself." "And what do you see now?" I asked quietly. He gestured around my chambers. "I see someone who found her own path, who didn't need our approval to succeed." He paused. "I see a judge I would be proud to appear before if I were ever in court." The words hung between us, imperfect but sincere. Not a complete understanding, but an opening. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded, standing to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Your mother and I are hosting a dinner next Sunday. Nothing fancy, just family. We'd like you to come if you're willing." I considered his invitation, thinking of all the Sunday dinners that had left me feeling smaller, less worthy, invisible. Then I thought of Christopher, of the tentative bridge with Victoria, of this moment with my father. "I'll be there," I said, "but I can't stay long. The Justice Center has a community legal workshop that evening." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "We'll take whatever time you can give us." After he left, I sat for a long while, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the public defender's office to the Justice Center to the bench. From the family failure to her honor. From silence to voice. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Still on for the workshop Sunday?" "Yes," I replied, "but I might be a little late. Having dinner with my family first." "The family?" She texted back with a shocked emoji. "Yes, but don't worry. I'm not going back to the kids' table. I'm bringing my own seat to the table now." My own seat, my own voice, my own path. They had written me out of their version of success, so I created my own definition. And as for the failure they thought I was? She now wore a judge's robe, and justice was her legacy. The Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt different this time. When I pulled into the circular driveway, my palms weren't sweating. When I walked through the front door, my shoulders weren't hunched. And when I took my seat at the dining table, placed between Victoria and my father rather than at the far end, I didn't feel like an intruder. The conversation still revolved around careers and achievements, but there was a subtle shift in tone. My father asked about a recent case that had made the local news, a housing discrimination suit I'd presided over that had resulted in a landmark settlement. "The paper said your ruling created a new precedent for tenant protections," he said, passing me the potatoes. "That must be satisfying." "It is," I replied. "But what's more satisfying is seeing the real-world impact. 30 families get to stay in their homes." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Didn't the Landlords Association appeal?" "They did," I confirmed. But the appellate court upheld my decision last week. Good for you, my mother said, her voice carrying a note of genuine approval that I couldn't remember hearing before. I always said you were stubborn. I laughed. You said, I was obstinate. There's a difference. Semantics, she replied with a dismissive wave, but she was smiling. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still old patterns trying to reassert themselves, but there was also something new, a tentative respect, perhaps, or at least a willingness to see me as I was, rather than as they had wanted me to be. After dinner, as promised, I excused myself to attend the Justice Center workshop. To my surprise, Christopher asked if he could join me. I'd like to see how these workshops actually run, he explained, for my public interest law seminar. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. Just don't stay out too late. You have that property law exam tomorrow. In the car, Christopher was full of questions about the center, about my cases, about the path that had led me from public defender to judge. I answered as honestly as I could, including the challenges and disappointments alongside the victories. Did you ever doubt yourself? He asked as we pulled into the center's parking lot. When everyone was telling you that you were making the wrong choices? I considered the question carefully. I doubted myself constantly, I admitted. There were so many nights I lay awake wondering if they were right, if I was just being stubborn or naive or idealistic. But then I'd go to work the next day and see the difference our cases were making in real people's lives, and those doubts would quiet down, at least for a while. He nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. It's like, you have to believe in something bigger than your own success. Exactly, I said, impressed by his insight. Success isn't just about titles or salaries, it's about impact. The FI workshop that evening focused on tenant rights, a timely topic given my recent ruling. As I watched Christopher engage with community members, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions, I felt a surge of hope, not just for him, but for the future, of justice in our community. After the workshop, as we were helping to stack chairs, Maya sidled up to me. So that's Victoria's kid? She asked, nodding toward Christopher. Yes, and possibly the Justice Center's newest intern this summer. Maya raised her eyebrows. Well, well, the times they are a-changin'. Slowly, I cautioned. But yes, they are. Later that week, I received an unexpected email from Judge Harmon, the same Judge Harmon who had denied my recusal request in the Harrison case, my father's golf buddy, the establishment figure I had assumed would always view me as an outsider. Subject: Court Reform Committee. Dear Judge Reyes, I am writing to invite you to join the newly formed Court Reform Committee. Your experience in community justice initiatives and your perspective as a former public defender would be invaluable as we work to make our courts more accessible and equitable. The first meeting is scheduled for next Friday at 2 p.m. Sincerely, William Harmon, presiding judge. I stared at the screen, trying to parse the real meaning behind the invitation. Was this an olive branch? A political maneuver? Or perhaps a genuine recognition that different perspectives were needed to improve the system? In the end, I decided it didn't matter. What mattered was the opportunity to influence changes that could benefit the people who most needed fair access to justice. I replied with a simple acceptance and added the meeting to my calendar. When Friday arrived, I entered the conference room with measured expectations. The committee consisted of 8 judges, including Harmon and myself, representing different divisions of the court. I was by far the newest judge in the room, and the only one with a background in public defense. Judge Harmon nodded to me as I took my seat. Judge Reyes, thank you for joining us. We were just discussing the bail reform proposal. For the next 2 hours, I listened more than I spoke, getting a feel for the dynamics in the room. There were clear factions, The traditionalists who viewed any change with suspicion, the moderate reformers who supported incremental improvements, and the two of us who advocated for more substantial changes. To my surprise, Harmon often aligned himself with the reform position, though his approach was more measured than mine. When I finally spoke at length about the devastating impact of cash bail on low-income defendants, he listened attentively. "Judge Reyes makes a compelling point," he said when I finished. "The data clearly shows that pretrial detention due to inability to pay bail results in worse outcomes, regardless of the merits of the case. This isn't just a matter of fairness, it's a matter of accuracy in our system." As the meeting concluded, Harmon approached me. "I'm glad you agreed to join the committee, Judge Reyes. Your perspective is refreshing." "Thank you," I said, still slightly wary. I admit I was surprised by the invitation. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, well, after the Harrison case, I did some reflection. Your handling of that situation, despite the pressure, was exemplary. It reminded me of why I became a judge in the first place." I didn't mention my father, or the attempted influence, or the denied recusal. There was no need. We both knew what he was referring to. "The system works best when it works for everyone," I said instead. "That's all I'm trying to ensure." Art nodded. "Indeed. Well, see you at next month's meeting. I look forward to your thoughts on the jury selection reforms." As I walked back to my chambers, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The same people who had once dismissed me were now seeking my input. The same system that had seemed impenetrable was now showing small openings for meaningful change. That evening, I received a text from Victoria. "Heard you're on Harmon's reform committee. Dad's impressed. So am I, actually." I smiled at the grudging admission. "Thanks. It's a start." Christopher won't stop talking about the tenant rights workshop. He's writing his term paper on housing justice now. What have you done to my son? I could almost hear the mix of exasperation and reluctant pride in her voice. Just showed him another perspective, I replied. He's making his own choices. There was a long pause before her next message appeared. Mom wants to know if you're free for brunch on Sunday, Dad's birthday. I checked my calendar. No workshops, no urgent cases to review. I can make it. What time? 11 I. And Elena? No paper napkin this time. I promise. It was as close to an apology as Victoria was likely to come, at least for now. I accepted it for what it was. A small acknowledgement of past wrongs. A tentative step towards something better. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse to find a young attorney waiting outside my chambers. She looked nervous, clutching a file folder like a lifeline. Judge Reyes, I'm Sarah Chen. I'm with the Public Defender's Office. I invited her in, curious about what had brought her to see me directly rather than in court. What can I do for you, Ms. Chen? She took a deep breath. I'm handling the Rodriguez case, the one where the defendant was charged with felony drug possession but claims the drugs were planted by police. I nodded, familiar with the case. It was scheduled for my courtroom the following week. The prosecutor's office is offering a plea deal, reduced charges, 6 months instead of the potential 5 years if we go to trial. She hesitated. My supervisor says I should advise my client to take it, that we can't win against police testimony. And you disagree? I think we have evidence of a pattern of misconduct by this particular officer. Similar allegations in 3 other cases in the past year, but I'm a first-year PD and no one's taking me seriously. She looked down at her hands. I heard you were a public defender before becoming a judge, that you took on difficult cases against the odds. I leaned back in my chair, careful to maintain judicial neutrality while still offering the guidance she was seeking. Ms. Chen, I can't advise you on strategy for a case that will be in my courtroom. That would be improper. Her face fell. I understand. I shouldn't have come. However, I continued. I can tell you that as a judge, what I value most is attorneys who are thoroughly prepared, who know their cases inside and out, and who have the courage to present all relevant evidence, even when it challenges prevailing narratives. She looked up, a spark of determination replacing the uncertainty in her eyes. So you're saying I should trust my instincts? I'm saying that your ethical obligation is to provide zealous representation for your client based on your professional judgment. If you believe there's relevant evidence that should be presented, it's your duty to present it, regardless of who might find it inconvenient or uncomfortable. She nodded, sitting a little straighter. Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Chen? Document everything. The legal world has a short memory for verbal conversations but a long one for written records. After she left, I thought about myself at her age. Eager, idealistic, constantly second-guessing myself in the face of more experienced attorneys telling me to temper my expectations. I wished I'd had someone to remind me that courage was as important as knowledge in the pursuit of justice. The following week, I watched as Ms. Chen presented her case in my courtroom. She was nervous but thoroughly prepared, methodically introducing evidence of the officer's pattern of misconduct, challenging inconsistencies in the police report, and humanizing her client through thoughtful, direct examination. The prosecutor objected frequently, clearly frustrated by her refusal to back down. I overruled when the law supported her position and sustained when it didn't, maintaining strict neutrality throughout. When the jury returned a not guilty verdict, I saw the moment of realization on Ms. Chen's face, the understanding that she had trusted her judgment and it had made all the difference for her client. It was a look I recognized, one I had felt on my own face early in my career. After court adjourned, I returned to my chambers to find a handwritten note had been slipped under my door. Thank you for seeing me. Not just hearing me. S. Chen. I smiled, tucking the note into my desk drawer where I kept similar reminders of why this work mattered. Then I turned my attention to the next case on my docket, aware that each decision, each interaction, each moment of seeing someone who felt invisible had ripple effects beyond what I could measure. Sunday brunch for my father's birthday was held at the country club, a place where I had always felt slightly out of place, too earnest for the artificial politeness, too focused on substance over style. This time, though, I walked in with my head high, nodding to acquaintances who now viewed me through the lens of Judge Reyes, rather than the Reyes family's underachieving daughter. My father seemed genuinely pleased to see me, standing to greet me with a warmth that still felt new and slightly fragile. "Elena," he said, kissing my cheek, "I'm glad you could make it." "Happy birthday, Dad," I replied, handing him a small, carefully wrapped package. He opened it right there, revealing a vintage fountain pen I'd found at an antique shop, similar to one he'd lost years ago, a gift from his own father when he graduated medical school. "You remembered," he said, looking genuinely touched. "I haven't seen one like this in years." "I pay attention," I said simply. It was both explanation and gentle reminder that I had always been paying attention, even when they hadn't been paying attention to me. Brunch proceeded with surprising ease. James and his wife discussed their children's college plans. Victoria talked about a new pro bono initiative her firm was launching. Inspired, she admitted with a sidelong glance at me, by the Justice Center's community approach. My mother, ever the consummate hostess, kept the conversation flowing smoothly, skillfully, redirecting whenever tensions threatened to surface. But I noticed something different in her manner toward me, a newfound respect perhaps, or at least a recognition that I had carved out a place for myself that commanded a certain deference. As coffee was served, my father cleared his throat. "I have an announcement," he said, looking unusually solemn. "I've decided to step down as chief of surgery at the end of the year." A ripple of surprise went around the table. My father's position at the hospital had been central to his identity for as long as I could remember. But why? My mother asked. You're at the height of your career. He smiled slightly. Perhaps. But I've been thinking about legacy lately. About what really matters in the long run. His eyes met mine briefly. I've accepted a position with Doctors Without Borders. 6 months in Ethiopia to start. The table fell silent. This was so far outside my father's usual orbit that it seemed almost incomprehensible. The man who had spent decades building a prestigious career at the most exclusive hospital in the city was now volunteering to work in field hospitals in one of the poorest regions in the world. Dad, that's unexpected, Victoria finally said. Good for you, I added, genuinely impressed. That kind of work changes perspectives. He nodded. That's what I'm counting on. I've spent too many years in comfortable certainty. It's time to be uncomfortable for a while. After brunch, as we were walking to our cars, my father held me back slightly, letting the others go ahead. Your case, he said quietly. The housing discrimination one. It got me thinking about the difference between success and significance. You've been choosing significance all along, haven't you? I considered his question carefully. I never saw them as mutually exclusive, I replied. But yes, significance has always mattered more to me than success, as most people define it. He nodded thoughtfully. I've been successful by every conventional measure. Chief of surgery, country club membership, vacation home on the coast. But when I look at what you've built, not just a career, but a purpose, I wonder if I missed something essential along the way. It's never too late to find it, I said. No, he agreed. It's not. We walked in companionable silence to our cars. As I was about to get in, he said, I was wrong about you, Elena. We all were. I hope you know that I'm proud of you now. The words I had once longed to hear now landed differently. Not as validation I desperately needed, but as a truth I already knew, now finally recognized by others. Thank you, Dad, I said simply. That means a lot. The following week brought an invitation I never expected, a request to speak at the State Judicial Conference about community-centered justice initiatives. The email came from the Chief Justice herself, noting that my unique background and innovative approach would provide valuable perspective for judges across the state. As I prepared my remarks, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, not just the professional milestones, but the internal ones, the moments when I had doubted myself, the times I had nearly given in to others' expectations, the small acts of courage that had eventually built into a life of purpose. The day of the conference, I stood at the podium looking out at a sea of black robes, some worn by judges who had been on the bench for decades, others by newer appointees like myself, all of them now colleagues, peers in a system I was working to change from within. Good afternoon, I began. My name is Elena Reyes, and I come to you today not just as a superior court judge, but as someone who has seen our legal system from multiple perspectives, as a public defender, as a community legal advocate, and now as a member of the judiciary. I paused, scanning the room. In the back row, to my surprise, sat Victoria, watching intently. Many of you have followed traditional paths to the bench, prestigious firms, prosecutors' offices, political appointments. My path was different. For years, it was viewed by many, including my own family, as the wrong path. Too idealistic, too focused on those with the least power in our system. I saw a few judges shift uncomfortably in their seats. But what I've learned, and what I hope to share with you today, is that justice cannot be measured solely by the efficiency of our dockets or the consistency of our rulings. True justice must be measured by its impact on the lives of those who stand before us, especially those who have been systematically excluded from its protections. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined practical strategies for making courtrooms more accessible, for recognizing implicit biases in legal procedures, for ensuring that socioeconomic status didn't determine outcomes. I shared data, case studies, and personal experiences, making the case not just for incremental reforms, but for a fundamental shift in how we conceived of our roles as judges. In conclusion, I said, the robe we wear is not just a symbol of authority. It is a reminder of responsibility, to see clearly, to listen fully, and to ensure that justice is not just an abstract concept, but a lived reality for everyone who enters our courtrooms. Thank you. The applause was robust, if not universal. As judges approached me afterward with questions and comments, I noticed Victoria waiting patiently at the edge of the group. When the crowd finally thinned, she stepped forward. "That was quite a speech," she said. "Thanks for coming," I replied, genuinely curious about her presence. "I didn't expect to see you here." She shrugged slightly. "Professional development. And I wanted to see you in your element. And you're good at this," she admitted. "Really good. You had most of them eating out of your hand, even the dinosaurs who usually nap through these things." I laughed. High praise indeed. She hesitated, then added, "Christopher's internship at the Justice Center starts next week. He's nervous about living up to your expectations." "He'll be fine," I assured her. "He has good instincts." "Like his aunt," she said, the words clearly difficult for her to say, but sincere nonetheless. As we walked together toward the exit, a senior judge stopped us. "Judge Reyes," he said, nodding to me. "Powerful speech, gave us all something to think about." "Thank you, Judge Cranston." He glanced at Victoria. "And you must be the sister I've heard about. The corporate attorney, yes?" Victoria nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Interesting to have such different paths in one family," he remarked. "Must make for lively holiday discussions." Victoria and I exchanged a look, part shared history, part tentative new understanding. "You could say that," I replied diplomatically. After he moved on, Victoria turned to me. "That happens to you a lot now, doesn't it? Being recognized, respected." "Sometimes," I acknowledged. "It's still new." "Do you ever want to rub it in? Their faces? The ones who dismissed you before?" I considered her question thoughtfully. "No," I said finally. "That would mean I still needed their validation. I don't. What matters to me is the work itself." She nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I think I'm starting to understand that about you." As we parted ways in the parking lot, she surprised me with a brief, awkward hug. "See you at the center next week when I drop Christopher off," she said. "I'll be there," I promised. Driving home, I reflected on how far we had all come in such a relatively short time. The family that had once seen me as the failure now viewed me through a different lens, not just as successful in conventional terms, but as someone whose path had, meaning they were beginning to recognize, even if they couldn't fully understand it. But more important than their changed perception was my own unchanged purpose. The black robe I now wore wasn't a repudiation of my earlier work. It was an extension of it, a new vantage point from which to pursue the same essential goal: justice. That served everyone, not just those with power and privilege. They had written me out of their vision of success, so I created my own definition. And as for the robe they never thought I'd wear, it now represented not just achievement, but a daily opportunity to ensure that no one who entered my courtroom would ever feel as invisible as they once made me feel. 6 months after my speech at the judicial conference, I sat in my chambers, reviewing the quarterly impact report from the Court Reform Committee. The numbers were encouraging. Pre-trial detention rates down by 22%, case processing times improved by 30%, and public satisfaction with court procedures up by a significant margin. Small changes, implemented consistently, were beginning to shift the system toward greater fairness and accessibility. A knock at my door interrupted my reading. My clerk poked her head in. Judge Reyes? The governor's office is on line 1. I picked up the phone with a slight frown. Calls from the governor were rare, and usually signaled either a problem or an opportunity, sometimes both. This is Judge Reyes. Good morning, Judge. This is Andrea Michaels from the governor's office. The governor would like to meet with you tomorrow if your schedule permits. Would 10 a.m. work for you? I checked my calendar. A full docket in the morning, followed by the monthly meeting with court administration. I'm afraid I'm in court all morning. Would afternoon be possible? Let me check. A brief pause. The governor can do 3 p.m. That works. May I ask what this is regarding? The governor prefers to discuss it in person. It's a matter of some significance. After hanging up, I sat back, turning possibilities over in my mind. The governor didn't meet with Superior Court judges without reason. Most likely, it was related to the reform initiatives I'd been championing, either to express support or concern, depending on how the political winds were blowing. I returned to my review of the impact report, pushing speculation aside. Whatever tomorrow brought, the work in front of me today remained the same. The governor's office occupied the top floor of the state capitol building, with sweeping views of the city skyline. As I was led through the reception area, I noticed the staff's deferential manner. Not the cautious respect I received as a judge, but something more akin to curiosity, as if I were a puzzle they were trying to solve. Governor Larson rose from behind her desk as I entered, extending her hand with a warm smile. At 58, she carried herself with the confident ease of someone accustomed to wielding significant power. Judge Reyes, thank you for making time in your schedule. Please, have a seat. I settled into the chair opposite her desk, noting the thick folder in front of her with my name clearly visible on the tab. I appreciate the invitation, Governor. How can I assist you today? She leaned forward slightly. I've been following your work with great interest, Judge Reyes. Your reform initiatives, your community justice approach, your handling of several high-profile cases. You've made quite an impression in a relatively short time on the bench. Thank you. I'm just trying to ensure our courts serve all citizens equally. She nodded. And that's precisely why I've asked you here today. She opened the folder, scanning its contents briefly. As you may know, Justice Kimberly Chen is retiring from the State Supreme Court next month. I nodded. Justice Chen's retirement had been announced weeks ago, triggering immediate speculation about her replacement. As the first Asian American woman on the state's highest court, her departure would leave a significant vacancy. I'm forming a short list of potential nominees to fill her seat, the governor continued. Your name is on that list. I kept my expression neutral, though my pulse quickened. I'm honored to be considered, Governor. You should be. It's unusual to consider someone with less than a year on the bench for such a position, but your background is uniquely compelling. Public defender, founder of a nationally recognized legal aid network, and now a judge who's already making waves with practical reforms. She closed the folder. The question is, are you interested? The weight of the question settled around me, the state Supreme Court, a position with the power to shape legal precedent for decades to come, a platform to advocate for the systemic changes I believed in, and a validation that would silence even the most skeptical voices, including those that still occasionally echoed from my past. May I ask why me? I said finally. There must be more experienced judges under consideration. The governor smiled slightly. Experience comes in many forms, Judge Reyes. You've seen our legal system from angles most judges haven't. From the public defender's table, from community clinics, from grassroots organizing. That perspective is valuable, particularly now. She stood, walking to the window. Our courts are facing a crisis of legitimacy. Too many citizens believe justice is only for those who can afford it. Your record suggests you understand that problem in ways others don't. and that you have practical ideas for addressing it. I nodded slowly. I do care deeply about making our courts accessible to everyone. Then consider this a formal expression of interest, she said, turning back to me. My staff will be in touch about next steps. The vetting process is thorough, as you can imagine. As I rose to leave, she added, "And Judge Reyes? This conversation is confidential for now. Even being on the short list will make you a target for those who prefer the status quo." I understood immediately. Even with the governor's support, a nomination would face significant opposition from tough-on-crime politicians, from corporate interests, from traditionalists within the legal establishment itself. My family's reaction would be the least of my concerns. I understand, Governor. Thank you for your consideration. As I drove back to the courthouse, my mind raced with possibilities. A seat on the state Supreme Court had never been part of my plan. I had focused on the work in front of me, moving from public defense to the Justice Center to the Superior Court bench, always guided by the same core purpose: making justice accessible to those who needed it most. But this was an opportunity to influence not just individual cases, but the entire legal framework of our state. The chance to write opinions that would shape how laws were interpreted and applied for years to come. I parked in my usual spot, noticing how the afternoon sun caught the courthouse's stone facade, making it glow golden. This building that had once seemed so intimidating now felt like a second home, a place where, despite the system's flaws, I had found ways to make a difference. Would the Supreme Court be the same? Or would the increased scrutiny, the political pressures, the removed distance from individual cases change the nature of the work I felt called to do? These questions followed me into my chambers, where I found Maya waiting, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "There you are. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. The Justice Center just got the Marshall Foundation grant, full funding for the next 3 years. I broke into a genuine smile, momentarily setting aside my weighty thoughts. "Maya, that's incredible. The expansion can finally happen." She nodded enthusiastically. "Community legal clinics in 3 more neighborhoods, plus the youth advocacy program we've been planning. It's everything we hoped for." We hugged, celebrating the culmination of work that had begun years ago in that bare-bones office with second-hand furniture and determination. "This calls for a proper celebration," Maya declared. "Dinner tonight? The whole team wants to toast the good news." I hesitated, thinking of the governor's folder with my name on it, the confidential conversation, the life-changing decision potentially ahead of me. "Of course," I said finally. "I wouldn't miss it." That evening, surrounded by the Justice Center team at a local restaurant, I watched as Maya raised her glass in a toast. To everyone who believed in this vision when it was just an idea scribbled on a legal pad. To the clients who trusted us with their stories. To the volunteers who gave their time. And to Elena, who started all of this by refusing to accept that justice should be a luxury good. Glasses clinked amid cheers and laughter. I smiled, taking in the faces around the table. The young attorneys who had chosen public service over lucrative firm offers, the community organizers who had built trust in neighborhoods long wary of the legal system, the administrative staff who kept everything running on shoestring budgets and boundless dedication. This was my family too, the one I had built through shared purpose and mutual respect, the one that had seen my value even when my blood relatives hadn't. As conversations flowed around me, Christopher, now 6 weeks into his Justice Center internship, leaned over. "Aunt Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Mom told me you got a call from the governor's office today. Is it about the Supreme Court vacancy?" I kept my expression neutral. "That's not something I can discuss, Christopher." He nodded, understanding the implied confirmation. "I've been researching Justice Chen's key opinions for a class project. Her voice on the court has been so important. especially on access to justice issues. He hesitated. If it is about that, I think you'd be amazing. The sincerity in his eyes reminded me of myself at his age. Idealistic, passionate about justice, believing that the right people in the right positions could truly change the system. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. Later that night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, weighing the path ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Heard a rumor today. Call me when you can. I sighed, wondering how word had traveled so quickly. The legal community was smaller than most people realized, and information, especially significant information, had a way of finding corridors through even the most carefully closed doors. I dialed her number, preparing for questions I couldn't answer or worse, skepticism about my qualifications. Is it true? She asked without preamble when she picked up. I can't comment on that, Victoria. She was quiet for a moment. So it is true. The Supreme Court. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Another pause. Have you told Mom and Dad? There's nothing to tell right now. She sighed. Elena, this is big. If you're even being considered, that's extraordinary. I waited for the but, for the qualification, for the subtle undermining that had been the background music of our relationship for so long. Instead, she said, You deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I think you deserve... Nah. The words caught me off guard. Simple, direct, without reserve. Thank you, I managed. Christopher's been raving about the Justice Center, by the way, says it's completely changed how he thinks about legal practice. I smiled, grateful for the change of subject. He's doing great work. You should be proud. I am, she admitted. And a little envious, if I'm honest. He's so certain about what he wants to do. I don't think I ever had that clarity. The vulnerability in her voice was new, a crack in the polished facade she had maintained for as long as I could remember. It's never too late to find. It, I said, echoing the words I'd spoken to our father months earlier. Maybe, she replied, sounding unconvinced. Anyway, if the rumor is true, you have my support, for whatever that's worth. It was worth more than I had expected. Another small bridge built across the chasm of our different paths. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity. The governor's vetting team conducted extensive interviews with colleagues, reviewed my cases, examined my financial records and public statements. Each day brought new questions, new forms to complete, new aspects of my life to explain and defend. Through it all, I continued my work on the bench, careful to maintain the same diligence and fairness that had guided me from the beginning. The possibility of a Supreme Court nomination couldn't be allowed to influence the cases in front of me now. Then came the call I had been both anticipating and dreading. Judge Reyes, the governor would like to see you tomorrow morning at 9. Decision time. I arrived at the governor's office to find not just Governor Larson, but also her chief of staff and the state's attorney general. Their expressions gave nothing away as I was shown to a seat. Judge Reyes, the governor began, thank you for your patience throughout this process. After thorough consideration, I've made my decision regarding Justice Chen's replacement. I nodded, keeping my breathing steady. I'd like to nominate you to the state Supreme Court. Even though I had known it was a possibility, even a probability, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a jolt through me. This was real. This was happening. Before you respond, she continued, I want to be clear about what lies ahead. The confirmation process will be challenging. Your background as a public defender will be scrutinized. Your work with the Justice Center will be characterized by some as activist. Your relative inexperience on the bench will be questioned repeatedly. The Attorney General nodded in agreement. The opposition will be substantial and vocal. Are you prepared for that level of public examination? I considered the question carefully. I've never shied away from difficult paths when I believed in the destination, I said finally. If you believe I'm the right person for this position, then yes, I'm prepared for the challenges ahead. The governor smiled. Good, because I do believe you're the right person. Not despite your unconventional background, but because of it. She stood, extending her hand. Congratulations, Judge Reyes. The formal announcement will be made tomorrow morning. As I left the Capitol building, I felt strangely calm. The decision had been made. The path was set. All that remained was to walk it with the same purpose and integrity that had brought me this far. My first call was to Maya. It's happening, I said when she answered. The nomination. It's official. Her whoop of joy was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Elena, this is incredible. The Supreme Court. When is the announcement? Tomorrow morning, and then the real work begins, getting through confirmation. We'll help however we can, she promised. The entire Justice Center network will mobilize. You won't face this alone. My next call was to my parents. My mother answered, her voice suspicious of an unexpected midday call. Elena? Is everything all right? Yes, Mom. Everything's fine. Is Dad there too? I'd like to speak with both of you. He's right here. I'll put you on speaker. I took a deep breath. I wanted you to hear this from me before it becomes public tomorrow. Governor Larson is nominating me to the state Supreme Court. The silence that followed lasted just a beat too long. The state Supreme Court? My father finally said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Are you serious? Yes, Dad. The formal announcement is tomorrow morning. But that's extraordinary, my mother said. You've only been a judge for less than a year, I know. It's unusual, but the governor feels my background brings a valuable perspective to the court. Another pause. Then my father spoke again, his voice different now, softer, almost wondering. The state Supreme Court, our Elena. The possessive "our" struck me, not as a claim of ownership, but as an acknowledgement of connection. For the first time in memory, there was no qualification to his pride, no subtle suggestion that I should have done things differently. We're so proud of you, my mother added, her voice thick with emotion. So very proud. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long moment, absorbing the shift that had just occurred. The family that had once seen me as the failure, the disappointment, the one who had chosen the wrong path, was now claiming my success as if they had believed in me all along. There was irony in that, of course, but there was also healing, a chance to rewrite not just my relationship with them, but perhaps their understanding of success itself. The next morning, I stood beside Governor Larson as she announced my nomination to a packed press room. Cameras flashed, reporters called out questions, and my name was officially placed into contention for one of the highest judicial positions in the state. Judge Reyes brings a unique perspective to this nomination, the governor said. Her experience as a public defender and community legal advocate gives her a first-hand understanding of how our courts impact the most vulnerable citizens. Her record on the Superior Court bench demonstrates her commitment to fair and equal application of the law. I believe she will be an outstanding addition to our state Supreme Court. As the press conference ended and we moved to a smaller room for individual interviews, I caught sight of familiar faces in the back of the room. Maya, several colleagues from the Justice Center, and, to my surprise, Victoria and Christopher. Victoria approached as the crowd thinned, looking almost shy, an expression I had never associated with my confident, assertive sister. Congratulations, she said. This is, well, it's something. I smiled. Thank you for coming. It means a lot. She glanced around at the reporters still hovering nearby. Are you ready for what comes next? The scrutiny will be intense. I'm ready, I assured her. My record speaks for itself, and I believe in the work I've done. She nodded slowly. You know, when we were growing up, I always thought you were the one who couldn't handle pressure, who wasn't tough enough. She met my eyes directly. I was wrong. You might be the strongest one of all of us. Coming from Victoria, competitive, achievement-oriented Victoria, this admission was extraordinary. Thank you, I said simply. Christopher joined us, practically bouncing with excitement. This is amazing, Aunt Elena, a Justice Reyes on the Zai. Supreme Court! I laughed at his enthusiasm. There's still the confirmation process, Christopher. This is just the beginning. You'll get confirmed, he said, with the absolute certainty of youth. You have to. The court needs your voice. Over the following weeks, the prediction was tested rigorously. As the governor had warned, the opposition was substantial and vocal. Conservative legal groups questioned my experience. Tough-on-crime politicians criticized my public defender background. Corporate interests worried openly about my history of ruling against powerful entities in favor of individual rights. The confirmation hearings were scheduled for 3 weeks of intense questioning. On the morning of the first day, I arrived at the state capitol to find supporters lining the steps: legal aid attorneys, former clients, community advocates, law students. They held signs reading, "Justice for Justice Reyes," and "Equal justice needs equal voices." Inside, the hearing room was packed. The Judiciary Committee members sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from openly supportive to skeptically hostile. In the gallery behind me sat Maya, my parents, Victoria, and Christopher, a show of unified support that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. The committee chair called the hearing to order. We are here today to consider the nomination of Judge Elena Reyes to the State Supreme Court. Judge Reyes, please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. As I took the oath to tell the truth, I felt the weight of the moment, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong in the halls of power, that their path was wrong, that their voice wasn't valuable. The questioning began immediately, pointed and often aggressive. Judge Reyes, you've been on the bench for less than a year. How can you possibly have the judicial experience necessary for our highest court? Judge Reyes, as a former public defender, can. You assure this committee that you will be fair to prosecutors and law enforcement? Judge Reyes, your work with the Justice Center has been described by some as activist in nature. How can we trust that you will interpret the law as written rather than as you wish it to be? I answered each question directly, without defensiveness, drawing on my years of courtroom experience to remain calm under pressure. Senator, while my time on the bench has been relatively brief, my 15 years as a practicing attorney have given me extensive experience with our state's legal system from multiple perspectives. I believe this diversity of experience is an asset, not a liability. Senator, fairness is the cornerstone of justice. As a judge, my duty is to apply the law impartially to the facts presented, regardless of which party brings the case. My record on the Superior Court bench demonstrates this commitment. Senator, the work of the Justice Center was focused on ensuring that all citizens have meaningful access to our legal system. This isn't activism. It's a fundamental principle of our democracy that justice must be accessible to everyone, not just those with resources. The questioning continued for hours, then days. Some committee members were clearly searching for any reason to oppose my nomination. Others asked thoughtful questions about legal philosophy and judicial approach. Through it all, I maintained my composure, answering honestly even when the truth was complex or might not be what certain senators wanted to hear. On the final day of hearings, the committee chair announced that character witnesses would be heard, individuals who could speak to my qualifications and temperament. Maya spoke eloquently about our work together at the Justice Center. A former client shared how my representation had changed the trajectory of her life. Judge Harmon, to my surprise, testified about my contributions to the Court Reform Committee and my exemplary judicial temperament. Then, unexpectedly, Victoria approached the witness table. "My name is Victoria Reyes Marshall. I am a partner at Garfield and Winters, and I am Judge Reyes's sister." A murmur went through the room. This hadn't been planned. Victoria hadn't mentioned any intention to testify. "I have not always understood or appreciated my sister's choices," she began, her voice clear and steady. "For many years, our family measured success in a particular way: prestigious positions, financial rewards, social status. By those metrics, we often viewed Elena's career as less than." She paused, gathering herself. "We were wrong, profoundly wrong. What Elena understood, long before the rest of us, was that true success isn't measured by titles or salaries, but by impact. By whether your work makes the world more just, more fair, more humane." I felt a tightness in my throat as she continued. "My sister has dedicated her career to ensuring that our legal system works for everyone, not just those with power and privilege. She has stood up for people who had no one else to stand for them. She has built institutions that will continue this work long after any of us are gone." Victoria looked directly at the committee members. "If that isn't the kind of character and commitment we want on our highest court, then I don't know what is." As she returned to her seat, our eyes met briefly. In that moment, something long broken between us began to heal. Not completely, perhaps, but significantly. The committee voted the following day, 7-5 in favor of my nomination, sending it to the full state Senate for consideration. 2 weeks later, after lengthy floor debate, the Senate confirmed my appointment by a narrow margin. On the day of my investiture, I stood in chambers preparing to take the oath that would make me the newest justice of the state Supreme Court. The black robe I would wear was new, custom-made for this position, yet it represented the same commitment to justice that had guided me from the beginning. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. My clerk opened it to reveal my family, all of them. My parents, Victoria and her husband, James and his wife, Christopher and his cousins. They filed in quietly, uncharacteristically solemn. My father stepped forward first. "We wanted to see you before the ceremony, to tell you." He paused, unaccustomed to emotional declarations. "To tell you that we understand now. What you've been building all these years. The vision you had that we couldn't see." My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "We're so proud of you, Elena. Not just because of this position, but because of the path you took to get here. The path you once mocked." I finished gently. "It's okay, Mom. We can acknowledge the past, honestly." Victoria stepped forward. "The family failure," she said quietly. "That's what we called you, and now you're Madam Justice Reyes." I smiled at the irony. Life takes unexpected turns. "No," my father said firmly. "This wasn't unexpected. This was earned, every step of the way." A court officer appeared at the door. "Justice Reyes, it's time." As we walked toward the courtroom where the ceremony would take place, my family fell in behind me, no longer leading the way or showing me the right path, but following the one I had forged myself. The courtroom was packed with colleagues, friends, community members, former clients, the constellation of connections I had built throughout my career. As I walked down the center aisle, I caught glimpses of familiar faces: Maya beaming with pride, Ms. Chen from the public defender's office, Judge Harmon nodding respectfully, clients whose cases had changed their lives and mine. At the front of the courtroom stood the Chief Justice, ready to administer the oath that would formally install me as a member of the state's highest court. I turned to face the audience, scanning the rows until I found my family seated in the front row. They looked back at me with expressions I had long ago stopped hoping to see: genuine pride, respect, understanding. The Chief Justice stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to witness the investiture of Elena Reyes as an Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court. As I raised my right hand to take the oath, I thought of all the moments that had led to this one. The nights working alone in that warehouse-turned-legal clinic, the courtroom victories and defeats as a public defender, the community workshops, the first day on the Superior Court bench, and yes, even the family dinners where I had been dismissed and diminished. Each of those moments had shaped me, had strengthened my resolve, had clarified my purpose. The family that had once mocked me as the failure now watched as I ascended to one of the highest positions in our legal system. But the true victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in staying true to the vision of justice that had guided me all along. I, Elena Reyes, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Associate Justice of the Supreme Court according to the best of my ability. The words echoed in the hushed courtroom, a promise and a commitment. As I finished the oath, the audience erupted in applause. The Chief Justice shook my hand, leaned close, and whispered, "Welcome to the court, Justice Reyes. We need your voice. Here." I turned to face the audience, now on my feet, their applause washing over me in waves. In the front row, my family stood with them, clapping with genuine pride. They had written me out of their vision of success, so I created my own definition. And as for the judge's robe they never thought I'd wear, it now represented not just personal achievement, but a platform from which to ensure that justice, true justice, would be accessible to all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.